today's mindful moment. Today we'll be taking a deep dive into Freida McFadden's The Housemaid's Secret. And we've got quite a bit to unpack here. We've got the book itself, obviously. We've also got some interesting analysis to consider, along with a whole range of opinions. Everything from glowing 5-star reviews to some pretty harsh critiques.
You know what really stood out to me? It's how McFadden kind of turns the whole idea of a housemaid on its head.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we tend to think of them as these silent observers, people who just blend into the background, right?
Right.
But in this story, the housemaid is like thrust right into the center of this like really dark and twisted conspiracy. She becomes a major player, like life or death stuff.
Absolutely. And you're not kidding about the anything but ordinary part. I mean,
Yeah.
Millie Calloway, the protagonist, she's an ex-con who's trying to put her life back together. And that right there, that adds a whole other layer to the story. Because right away you're wondering, can we really trust what she's telling us?
And that's where McFadden's just brilliant with her use of what we call ethos in storytelling.
By giving Millie this troubled past, it makes her vulnerable. But it also gives her kind of credibility.
That's a good point.
Yeah, we know she's messed up in the past.
Yeah.
But you can also sense, like how determined she is to do the right thing this time. And that makes her really compelling.
Yeah.
And relatable, I think, despite all her flaws.
Yeah, I agree. You end up rooting for her, even when she's, maybe not making the smartest decisions.
Right.
So Millie ends up getting hired by this wealthy family, the Garricks. She's supposed to be taking care of the wife, Wendy, who seems to be sick. But as Millie starts settling in, she picks up on these, really strange vibes. What did you think about that whole atmosphere, that sense of unease that McFadden creates early on?
That was classic suspense writing. But McFadden, she just nails it.
Yeah.
It's all these subtle details like strange behavior, whispered conversations, this feeling that everyone's hiding something. And it creates this tension that you can just feel building.
Oh, for sure.
You're right there with Millie, feeling her suspicion grow, wondering what's really going on behind closed doors. And believe me, the truth is way darker than anyone could have guessed. Turns out Wendy is having an affair, and the husband, Douglas, he finds out about it. But because of their prenup, if Wendy's the one who's at fault for the divorce, she gets basically nothing.
And this is where things take a really unexpected turn. We see how power and privilege can really distort things. Wendy, she's got all this money and status, and she'll do anything to hold on to it.
Yeah, you start to see her as this, master manipulator. She's playing the victim. But at the same time, she's cooking up this plan to get rid of her husband. And guess who she picks as her unwitting accomplice? Millie, of course.
And McFadden, she's so clever here. She uses Millie's desire to help people, especially women who are being abused. That's what makes it so disturbing,
It is.
It shows how someone like Wendy can twist good intentions, how she can exploit someone who's just trying to do the right thing.
Yeah. It's a real gut punch when you realize Wendy's been playing Millie this whole time.
Yeah.
Preying on her empathy, using her past against her.
And that's where we get into this whole idea of moral ambiguity. It makes you question what's right and wrong, especially when you're dealing with characters who aren't simply good or bad.
Right. It's not black and white. Everyone's got secrets. Everyone has their reasons for doing what they do. And you keep going back and forth trying to figure out who you can trust and what their real motives are.
Exactly. And then, boom, we've got murder. McFadden uses these shocking acts of violence to completely flip our ideas of who's the victim and who's the villain.
No kidding. It's a total game changer. Suddenly, everybody's a suspect. And nothing is what it seems.
And the pacing is just perfect.
Yeah.
Just when you think you've got things figured out, there's another twist, another betrayal, another danger lurking around the corner.
It keeps you guessing the whole time.
Yeah.
And poor Millie, she's stuck right in the middle of it all, trying desperately to clear her name, to figure out what really happened.
And this is where Millie's smarts and resourcefulness really come into play. She realizes she's been framed, and framed expertly. So she has to become a detective herself, which puts her in even more danger.
It's like watching a chess match, but with really high stakes. Millie's trying to outmaneuver Wendy to expose her for the manipulator she is.
And it's not just Wendy she has to worry about, right?
Right.
There's Russell, Wendy's lover. He's got his own agenda, his own secrets.
Exactly. The lies just keep piling up, and you realize that pretty much everyone's got their hands dirty in this whole mess.
And that's what makes this book so captivating. It's more than just a whodunit. It's a psychological thriller. McFadden takes us deep into the darkest parts of human nature. She makes us think about things like manipulation, betrayal, and what people will do to protect what's theirs.
Okay, so before we get into the final act of this crazy story, let's
Mhm.
talk about what the critics had to say. Some reviewers, they absolutely loved the book. They praised the intricate plot, the suspense, the way McFadden builds tension.
Yeah, a lot of them talked about how believable the characters were, even the ones who were, deeply flawed, not exactly good people. They were particularly drawn to Millie's internal struggle, her fight to move past her mistakes and find some kind of redemption, especially with this constant threat that she's going to fall back into her old ways.
Right. But then you've got other reviewers who weren't as impressed. Some felt that the plot was a little predictable in places, and a few even had issues with Millie's character. They thought she was less likable in this book compared to the previous one.
Which is interesting, right? Because it shows how differently people can interpret the same story.
Yeah, totally.
Some readers found Millie impulsive, maybe even frustrating, but others saw her as a survivor, someone making tough choices in really impossible situations.
So, to those of you listening, what are your thoughts on this? Do you sympathize with Millie? Or do you find her actions a little hard to believe, maybe even reckless?
Well, it's important to remember that Millie's past has shaped who she is. Her experiences, they've influenced how she sees the world, how she reacts to things.
Right, her time in prison, her work with victims of domestic abuse, she's carrying all that baggage with her, and it affects the decisions she makes.
Exactly, and it makes her a much more complex and interesting character.
For sure.
Much more so than, some perfect heroine who always does the right thing.
Definitely. And that complexity is reflected in the mixed reviews we see. Some readers might want a protagonist who always makes the right choices, but McFadden gives us something different, a flawed character.
Wow.
A human character, someone who's struggling with her own inner demons.
And I think that's what elevates this book. It's not just a typical thriller. It forces us to think about the gray areas, to question our own judgments,
Right.
to consider the impact of the choices we make.
Yeah, that's a good point. Before we dive into the final act and see how Millie gets out of this mess, I want to talk about her partnership with Enzo. They work together to help women escape abusive situations, and their bond is obviously strong. But I have to admit, Enzo kind of remained a mystery to me. What about you?
Yeah, there's definitely an ambiguity about him.
Right.
We know he's committed to helping Millie and that he shares her passion for justice, but his own story, his motivations, they're kind of shrouded in mystery.
It's like he's a ghost. He shows up when needed, offers support, guidance, but never really reveals his true self.
Yeah, and it makes him a fascinating character, even a little unsettling. It makes you wonder, are his intentions really as pure as they seem?
Yep.
Or is there something darker going on beneath the surface?
I saw a few reviewers who picked up on that too. They felt like Enzo's role wasn't fully developed. They wanted to know more about his past, his thoughts, his feelings.
And I get that. I mean, he's crucial to Millie's journey,
Yeah.
but we only get these glimpses into who he is. So, yeah, we're left with these lingering questions about his true nature, about his role and everything that's going on.
It's almost like McFadden is leaving space for Enzo's story to be told later on. Like maybe there's a whole other layer to this saga waiting to be explored.
Yeah.
And maybe Enzo will be at the center of it.
Oh, it's definitely possible. With McFadden, you can never rule out surprises, hidden depths, unexpected revelations.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork. We've talked about the characters, we've explored the main conflicts, and now we're ready to tackle the final act of The Housemaid's Secret.
Buckle up. It's a wild ride. Twists, betrayals, shocking revelations. McFadden keeps you guessing right up to the very end.
And don't forget, we'll be back with part 2 to talk about how it all wraps up. And we'll dive even deeper into the themes that McFadden so brilliantly explores in this book. Welcome back to the deep dive. When we left off, Millie was in a really tight spot, framed for murder, tangled up in a web of lies, and trying like crazy to figure out the truth. The stakes are higher than ever at this point.
And this is where McFadden really kicks things into high gear with the pacing.
Yeah, it gets intense.
The story just takes off. You're on the edge of your seat. There's this sense of urgency, like a ticking clock, and every chapter just throws another bombshell at you.
And the plot twists.
Yeah.
McFadden is a master at keeping you guessing.
Oh, absolutely.
Just when you think you've got it all figured out, bam! Another twist comes out of nowhere. It's like trying to put together a puzzle where the pieces keep changing shape.
One of the biggest wait what moments is when we find out that Douglas, the husband, the supposed victim, well, it turns out he had a few tricks up his sleeve.
Oh, yeah.
Even in death, he managed to outsmart his wife.
Talk about a twist you don't see coming. It completely changes everything. It makes you realize that everyone in this story is playing a deep game.
Exactly. See, Douglas, he knew his wife was up to something, so he made some changes to his will. Basically, if he died, she'd get nothing.
Wow.
It's a brilliant move, and it adds a whole other layer to the power struggle between them.
It really shows how well McFadden understands people.
Yeah.
She's saying that even the people who seem like victims can be incredibly manipulative and strategic.
And that twist doesn't just affect Wendy, right? It throws Millie's whole quest for justice off track.
How so?
Well, now she's not just fighting to clear her name. She's caught in this battle for control of Douglas's fortune.
So the stakes just keep getting higher. And it's harder than ever to tell what's right and what's wrong. Millie has to make some tough decisions. She has to figure out how far she's willing to go to make things right.
And then there's Russell, Wendy's lover. We learn a lot more about him in this part of the book.
What do we find out?
It turns out he's not just some lovesick fool who's being used by Wendy. He's got his own ambitions, his own desires, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to get what he wants.
So he's playing everyone too.
Exactly. And then things really explode when Mary Beth enters the picture.
Who's Mary Beth?
Russell's wife. And she's not just some heartbroken spouse. She is a force of nature. She's angry. She's determined to get justice.
I love how McFadden turns the whole other woman trope on its head.
Me too.
Mary Beth isn't just sitting around feeling sorry for herself.
Nope.
She's taking charge.
Exactly.
She's speaking out. She's demanding accountability.
She brings this raw, unfiltered energy to the story. And her confrontation with Wendy and Russell, whew, that is one of the most intense scenes in the book.
Yeah. Oh, I bet.
All the lies and secrets come pouring out. It's like a pressure cooker exploding.
And in the middle of all this chaos, Millie is still trying to hold on to her own sense of right and wrong.
Right.
She's surrounded by darkness, violence, betrayal, and she's constantly being tempted to compromise her own values just to survive.
It's amazing how she manages to stay true to herself.
It is.
Even when she makes questionable choices, you can tell she's trying to do the right thing, even if it puts her in danger.
It really shows her strength of character.
And that's what makes the ending so powerful.
How so?
McFadden doesn't give us easy answers or neat, tidy solutions. She makes us think about the messy reality of justice and how the choices we make can have unexpected consequences.
Right. Even when the truth comes out and the guilty parties are punished, there's still this feeling of unease, like the damage has already been done.
Exactly.
Lives have been changed forever.
And there are these scars, these wounds from betrayal and loss that will probably never fully heal. It makes you think about the price of justice and how even when we try to do the right thing, sometimes there are unintended consequences.
So what happens to Millie in the end? Does she come out of this stronger, or is she broken by everything she's been through?
I think it's safe to say that this experience changes Millie profoundly.
Yeah.
She faces her demons, she confronts her weaknesses, and she comes out of it with a deeper understanding of human nature, both the good and the bad.
But she's also carrying a heavy burden.
Right.
The burden of the secrets she's uncovered,
Yeah.
and the weight of the lives that have been lost.
And that's what makes her such a fascinating character. She's not a superhero. She's not perfect. She's just a human being trying to make the best of a bad situation.
And trying to find some kind of redemption.
Exactly. And I think her journey is a testament to how resilient the human spirit can be, how we can grow and change even after going through terrible things.
You know, one thing I keep coming back to is how McFadden uses the setting, the house itself, to create this atmosphere of secrecy and isolation.
Oh, yeah. The house is like another character in the story.
It is.
A silent witness to all the lies and betrayals.
It's almost like the secrets are trapped within the walls.
Right.
Like they're seeping into the lives of everyone who lives there.
There's this constant feeling of being watched, of being trapped.
Yeah.
It's like the house itself is closing in on Millie as she gets closer to the truth.
And the contrast between the luxury of the house and the darkness hiding beneath the surface is really striking.
It is.
It reminds us that money and privilege can't protect you from the consequences of your actions.
Absolutely.
Okay, before we get too deep into the symbolism, let's talk about the relationship between Millie and Wendy.
Oh, that's a fascinating one.
It is.
It's this complex mix of power, manipulation, and even a strange kind of connection.
On the surface, they seem like complete opposites. Millie, the ex-con trying to turn her life around, and Wendy, the wealthy socialite who seems to have it all.
Right.
But as the story unfolds, you realize They're both trapped in their own ways.
They are.
They're both victims of their circumstances and their past choices.
And you can see how Millie, even though Wendy's manipulating her, she understands Wendy's desperation, her need for control, her desire for freedom.
And Wendy, in her own twisted way, sees something in Millie that she admires, maybe even envies.
It's complicated, full of contradictions, but there are these moments of genuine connection between them, and that's what makes this book so much more than just a typical thriller. McFadden doesn't just create these one-dimensional characters who are either good or bad. She explores the nuances of their relationships. She shows us the complexities of their motivations.
And she reveals how even people who are trying to hurt each other can still have this, like, shared vulnerability.
Yeah.
Okay, we've covered a lot in this deep dive. Shocking plot twists, compelling characters, a setting that's practically a character itself, and some really thought-provoking themes about power, justice, and the choices we make.
We've explored the dark side of wealth and privilege, the resilience of the human spirit, and the power of hope, even in the darkest of times.
But the journey's not over yet. We still have to see how it all ends, how all the secrets and betrayals and desperate choices come to a head.
Get ready for a showdown that will keep you on the edge of your seat. McFadden doesn't hold back.
It's going to challenge your ideas about justice.
It will.
And it will leave you thinking about the complexities of human nature long after you've finished the book.
Absolutely.
So join us for the thrilling conclusion of this deep dive into Freida McFadden's The Housemaid's Secret, #2. We'll talk about how everything wraps up, and we'll explore those lingering questions that McFadden leaves us with. Well, here we are, the final chapter of The Housemaid's Secret, #2. We've been through a lot with this book. Twists, turns, betrayals, you name it.
It's been quite a ride.
It has. So before we get into the ending itself,
Yeah.
I just want to say again how much I admire McFadden's writing.
Yeah,
She really knows how to craft a story that keeps you hooked.
absolutely.
The pacing, the characters, the atmosphere. It's all so well done.
And she doesn't shy away from the tough stuff either.
No, she doesn't. She makes you think about some pretty heavy themes,
Yeah.
like justice, morality, the consequences of our choices.
Right. It's not just a mindless thriller. It stays with you long after you finish the last page.
It does. So, without giving anything away,
Yeah.
how did you feel about the ending?
Well, I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, it ties everything together perfectly. All the loose ends are neatly resolved. But at the same time, McFadden leaves you with a few things to think about.
Like what?
Well, for one thing, it makes you question what true justice really means. Is it about punishment? Or is it about something more? And then there's the question of redemption. Can people really change? Can they overcome their past mistakes?
Those are big questions.
They are. But that's what makes this book so compelling. It doesn't offer easy answers. It makes you wrestle with these complex issues.
And it does it in a way that's both entertaining and thought-provoking.
Exactly.
Now, I know we can't go into too much detail without spoiling things for our listeners, but I'm curious, what was your reaction to the way Millie's story arc resolved?
Well, I think it's safe to say that she comes out of this experience a changed person.
In what way?
Well, she's faced incredible challenges. She's been betrayed by people she trusted, and she's had to make some really difficult decisions.
Yeah.
But through it all, she's shown a remarkable strength and resilience.
Yeah, she had.
She never gives up. She never loses sight of what's important to her.
And in the end, she finds a way to make peace with her past.
Exactly.
As a powerful message of hope and healing.
It is. And it makes you believe that even after going through something terrible, you can still come out on the other side.
Stronger than before.
Exactly.
So, to wrap things up, if you're looking for a thriller that will keep you on the edge of your seat, a story with complex characters, a twisty plot, and some really thought-provoking themes, then I highly recommend The Housemaid's Secret, #2.
I second that.
It's a book that will stay with you long after you've finished reading it. And it might even make you look at the world around you a little differently.
I might.
And that's the power of a great story.
It is.
Well, that's it for this week's Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of captivating content.